Hello, my name's Jade and today I'm going to be talking about the 13 books I read this summer. I have a part 1 to this video where I talk about all the books I read this summer that aren't novels, and in this video this is the part 2 where I'm talking about all the novels I read over the summer. I read 13, so we have quite a few to get through, so let's get started. The first book I finished was Conversations with Friends by Sally Rooney. This was her debut. I read this back in university during my undergrad. I think it was second year, 2018-2019-ish, and the TV show was coming out this year, and so I wanted to reread it so it was all fresh in my mind before I watched the TV show. I haven't watched the TV show yet, so that went well. I will watch it by the end of the year. Mark my words, and I'll probably update in a video what I thought. Normal People by her is one of my all-time favorite books. I loved that TV show as well, which is why I was so excited for this TV show, because I was getting very similar vibes, and if it was anything like the Normal People adaptation, it was going to be fantastic. Like I said, I had already read this one before, so I knew that I liked it. I really enjoyed it the first time I read it. I wasn't sure initially, like the first half of reading it I struggled with the writing style, I think, and then second half I really enjoyed, but then as time went on, the more I thought about it and the more I let it resonate, it kept coming up in my mind over and over again. And even though I couldn't remember the specific moments of it, like the characters and just the situation like was haunting me, I kept thinking about it, and so my opinion of it definitely increased over time. And then rereading it now after having read her other 2 books and loving them and getting used to her style a little bit more, and this kind of style of the book as well is very literary fiction. Upon rereading it, I can say that my opinion of it grew even more, my respect for it grew even more. I listened to the audiobook this time. I'm reading Normal People and Beautiful World for You for the first time. I listened to them both, and I find her writing much easier to digest as an audiobook. Her writing is quite blunt, and the way there's no speech marks, I just find it easier via audiobook. They're all narrated by the same person. Aoife McMahon does a great job. Every time I listen to a new one of these audiobooks, her voice adapts. I feel like they feel very singular. I don't get confused between them. It's a really complex story. I mean, all of her books are, but the characters are all so flawed. And again, all of her books are like this, but like reading it again, I was just so struck by how flawed and complicated they are. If you don't know what it's about, Frances is 21 years old, cool-headed and observant. She's a student in Dublin. She's best friends with a woman named Bobby, and they used to be a couple, but now they're not. They're just best friends. Complicated, layered relationship, as you can imagine. They make friends with an older couple, Nick and Melissa. Bobby kind of has a thing for Melissa, and Frances kind of grows an attachment to Nick. Very interesting, very layered. Very excited to watch the TV show. I'd give this one a 9 out of 10. That's what I gave it initially. Like, I think initially I probably gave it like an 8, and then it bumped up to a 9 because I thought it was so clever. I'm wondering if it might even be a 10. It's really well done. Normal People is still my favourite of the 3, but when I think of both of these books, when I think of both Conversations with Friends and Normal People, like a visceral reaction comes up in me. I think about these characters and these stories and how clever they are. I think it might be a 10 out of 10 actually. Beautiful World, Where Are You, if you can tell. My least favourite 3. I still like that one. I just don't connect to it as much. Like that reaction doesn't happen when I think about it. So yeah, 10 out of 10, starting strong. The next book I finished was the Skulduggery Pleasant Grimoire. Skulduggery Pleasant is a technically children's fantasy series. It's one of my favourite series of all time. It dominates this shelf here. This came out before the last book in the second series, and it basically recaps all of the books that had come out before then, so that you didn't have to reread the whole thing before you read the last book, because there's so many little bits and pieces. And there is bonus content in here. There are a couple new stories. One of them was kind of random and I didn't love. The other one is relevant to the series. It's important information, but it does obviously come up in the last book. And because I had recently reread them all, I didn't need the refresher. I mean, I wanted to read it to make sure I wasn't missing anything, but to me, it didn't have enough new exciting content to be worth the read. It took me a really long time. It took me over 2 months to read this one. I struggled through it. Definitely my least favourite of the Skulduggery Pleasant series, but like it's a grimoire. It's like, it's fine. It serves its purpose, definitely. Give it like a 4 out of 10. I would also like to quickly mention Armageddon Get Me Out of Here, which is a new edition of a story collection that was already, I'm grabbing the wrong book, already out. This takes place during phase 1, the first series, and it's a collection of short stories. Again, some of them are of higher importance than others. I do think they're fantastic. I really enjoyed a lot of these stories. We get some new ones in here. Can't think what the new ones are. I think some of them might be at the end of like exclusive Waterstone editions of the new series, and some of them are just new to this edition. It also has Apocalypse Kings, which is a novella. I think it's a novella at least. There weren't a ton in here that were new to me. There were only like 3 or 4 of the 7 that I hadn't read, I think. I don't think they were of the same caliber as the original stories. I don't know if it's because the original stories were set in phase 1 and they were really nostalgic and I'd already read them before. I don't know what it was. I wasn't as attached to them. If I had to give the new stories that I hadn't read before like an overall rating, I'd probably give them around a 6 or a 7 out of 10. I think the collection as a whole is still 8 because of my love of the other stories that are in there. I mean, it's not even an edition on Goodreads. I didn't like count it as one of the books I read because I'd already read the majority of this book. It's just that it came out in a new edition. And then next up, keeping in with this little theme we have going, is Until the End, the last book in the Skulduggery Pleasant series. I don't think it's the last we're going to see of these characters. I don't think. I'm trying really hard not to spoil things. I'm open to anything. I love these characters. These characters feel like home to me. Forever going to be one of my favourites. It has so much sentimental value and I just think they're really great. They're so much fun. It's clever. Things happen in this one that I wasn't anticipating to happen. Derek is really great at last books because Sign of the Light was my favourite Skulduggery Pleasant book. Excluding phase 2, I find it really hard to compare phase 1 and phase 2 together because they have such different energy and vibes and themes and they're just in such different places in these characters' lives. But this is up there in my ranking of phase 2. There were 1 or 2 things that I found a little hard to swallow, particularly in the end. Like some things just happened really quickly and I think it was purposefully done that way. It just wasn't my favourite. That's a matter of taste. I think it might be my favourite of phase 2. It's really good up until that point where like things got a little hard for me to chew at the end. But even then after that point, some things that happened were really clever. So it's difficult. But I had so much fun reading this one. I had the grandiose vibes reading it. If I had to rank phase 2, I think it'd be Until the End, Dead or Alive. Hard. It's difficult because my top 3 are Until the End, Dead or Alive, and Bedlam, and it's close. It's a close call between the 3 of them. All 3 are great in my opinion. Dead or Alive was also very exciting. We were all over the place. I love it when we're all over the place in the Skulduggery Pleasant books because it's so chaotic and stressful, but at the same time it works so well. Stakes are high and you can feel it the whole way through the book. Till the End, Dead or Alive, Bedlam, Top V, Seasons of War, Resurrection, and then Midnight. Yeah, I think I would give this one 8.59 out of 10. I'm very sad that it's over. I did not want it to be over. I was very upset come the end of this book. I'm looking forward to see whatever he does next. Next up was Ariadne by Jennifer Saint. I've owned this one for a really long time. I bought Electra and I said I wasn't going to buy it until I read Ariadne. I was like, well, now I have to read Ariadne. I was really excited to read it. I love Greek myth retellings. I love Greek myth. I love Greek ancient history. I love ancient history in general. I listened to the audiobook. The audiobook was narrated by Kristen Atherton and I enjoyed it for the most part. The writing every now and then would have these really beautiful lines. I was going back and forth as to whether I liked the narration. I don't think I had anything wrong with the narrator herself. I think it's just like this kind of book. It's whether it would have soaked in easier and I would have connected with the characters better if I could have had my own interpretation of what they were saying and how they were saying it. That's my biggest problem with audiobooks a lot of the time, is that the interpretation of the narrator's doing will be vastly different from what I think my own would be. And obviously they can, because it has to be a certain volume and a certain pacing, they can't always say things how they would realistically be said. I had a couple problems. I wrote a full 3,000 words essay. I haven't posted it anywhere because it needs going through. It's like first draft form. I finished the book and I had to write it because I had such mixed emotions. And the more I wrote this essay, the angrier I became. And the more I realised there are a lot of things that happen here that I was not okay with. We'll eventually post my essay, my opinion article somewhere. Probably Goodreads, I don't know necessarily though, and I'll link it in the description box when I do. Overall, I want to stress this, I did enjoy the experience of reading this book. I found the story really interesting. I think it's definitely a story that needs telling more because Ariadne is one of the lesser knowns and I don't think that's fair. My biggest problem was that called Ariadne. Ariadne is obviously a very central character in this book. Like, she is the main character, but I don't think she should have been, because we also see from Phaedra's, her little sister's perspective, and we also have Phaedra's story woven in there. But it's a shadow compared to the amount of time and the attention we spend with Ariadne. Phaedra's story in comparison is rushed, and it felt so unjust. And I think at times she was portrayed unsympathetically. Either just have it be with Ariadne and cut out all the stuff from Phaedra's perspective, or have it be 50-50, have it be Ariadne and Phaedra. Like, Phaedra is also a prominent character in Greek myth. She's not as well known as Ariadne. If you're going to write it to bring women's stories to the forefront, then let Phaedra be part of that. It just felt really unfair. Like, I went into it in my essay, I had like examples and everything. I love the way I'm calling this like an essay. It's just my opinion, is a book review. It was upsetting because I really wanted to like this book. I'm still going to read Electra. I'm still going to try and go with clean slate. A similar thing is happening with this one though, because it's called Electra. But I know for a fact we follow 3 women's stories. So if it's the same problem, I'm going to be really upset. I would give it a 5 out of 10, I think, because of how angry I was when I finished it. Next up, slightly more positive, is Piranessi by Susanna Clarke. To quote my Goodreads review, this is such a cute, clever little book. Really glad I read it. I bought it before all the hype, okay? I picked it up in Forbidden Planet because I was like, oh, that looks cool. I like the font and stuff. And it has a blurb from Madeline Miller, author of The Song of Achilles, aka one of my all-time favourite books. A blurb from Erin Morgenstern, author of The Starless Sea and The Night Circus, aka The Starless Sea being one of my all-time favourite books. And David Mitchell. His blurb actually, what a world Susanna Clarke conjures into being, what a tick-tock of reveals. Piranessi is an exquisite puzzle box. That sold me, to be honest, and it's stunning. The end papers are all these little seashells and stuff, and then the naked hardback is also just gorgeous. The way it's like Piranessi written out like that, it's such a stunning book. It's like a very interesting shape. It's like shorter and it's more square. I kind of had the same thing with Piranessi that I had with the Atlas 6 and The Invisible Life of Addie LaRue, in that before reading all of these books, I knew they had potential to be books that I really, really loved. Like Starless Sea, Song of Achilles level, like they all, I just had that feeling, you know, when you have that feeling, you're like, I should love this should be one of my favorites. And even having read them, they should be some of my new favorites. I love those books. They had all the right things, and I don't know what it was. Something was missing, like that urge in my heart and soul to say it's one of my new favorite books. I just clearly don't feel strongly enough about them, and it's so frustrating because I know they had all the things there that would make them one of my favorite books. This one in particular, like some of the people online that love this book, their other favorite books are my favorite books. So it especially felt weird. I mean, it is very, very clever. I think I found it slightly overhyped because I read it after like the Women's Prize and it got a lot of hype during that period. People have bold claims about this, and I agree a lot of what people say on the back. But I don't know if it's like out of this world amazing. It's very clever. It made me think a lot. It's so sweet and endearing, the story and the world and the character. Main character Piranessi. Oh, I haven't like given you synopsis for Piranessi. Oh, I don't know if I could give you one for this one. I don't want to tell you anything. I think you should go into it blank. Piranessi lives in the house. Perhaps he always has. That's all you need to know. The whole point of the book is figuring out what the hell is going on. And I guessed a good amount of what was going on earlier than I would have liked. I'm not going to say that like, oh, 2 pages in I knew everything. No. I wished I loved it more. I would still give it either an 8 or I think 8.5. I think it's a little overhyped for me. Personally, I think the hype got to me. I don't think I could give it a 9 out of 10. So I'll give it an 8.5. Next, over here. This is a problem because it doesn't fit on this shelf. The shelf is from Argos and it's, well, it fits if I squish the book. And it's the bane of my existence. I so wish I just got a Billy bookcase because the shelves, you can't lay them out equally, fully. Like you get these weird shelves where you can only fit paperbacks. It frustrates me to no end. Or like a hardcover but not a tall hardcover or a tall paperback, and this is a very tall paperback. Anyway, the next book I finished was Glass Houses by Melanie Murphy. I've been following Melanie Murphy on YouTube for years now. Following her on YouTube, I've been subscribed to her and following her on the platforms and a fan of hers for years. This isn't her debut. Her debut was If Only. The premise of that one didn't particularly strike a chord with me, so I didn't read it. I may one day. I'm open to the possibility, it's just not high on my priority list. I have read her non-fiction, Fully Functioning Human Almost, Growing Up in an Online Offline World, part memoir, part life guide. I think it needs a reread. It's one of those I think you need to keep going through and refreshing. I listened to the audiobook for this one. It's narrated by Jacqueline, oh, I've like scribbled it down on my notepad. Jacqueline Milne and Rosin Rankin. It's about two sisters, Jenna and Rosie Walker. They're both kind of going through difficult times in their lives. One of their neighbours starts a project to repair and kind of replenish this old garden that's not been taken care of for a while, and so they're, you know, gonna clean it up and replant it and make it nice. That neighbour is a doctor, and so a lot of his ex-patients he brings in who are all going through tough times to kind of use it as like a community building exercise, like a support group almost. You know, you're also busy and working while you're doing it and reconnecting with nature. It's a really sweet story. There's a lot of tough themes going on in here, and I think if you're someone struggling, or I think there's certain people, it's one of those books that if you read it when you're in the right place at the right time, could really connect with it and it could really mean a lot to you. I just wasn't in that place or that time. This genre, I'm hesitant to even say what it is because it's not, I don't know if it's a spoiler. Sorry, my camera overheated, so if things look different, that's why. As I was saying, there's an element here, it's very cool and mysterious, and it did make me think, and I wasn't sure initially if I liked it or not, because I think traditionally I don't love this element. I think more prominently, and obviously so in her first book, if you've read Christina Ricci's books, it's the same kind of thing. I've only read one of them, but I know for certain that it is also in Better Together. I've only read Again But Better. I did quite like it in this one though. I think in the end it was something quite cool and I liked the symbolism there, but I'm not 100% sure still. Like, I was definitely skeptical for a while. Yeah, I enjoyed the writing. I think I would have enjoyed it even more if I was reading it rather than listening to it. Yeah, I enjoyed it. It was sweet. I don't tend to think about it very much since having read it. Like I said, I just didn't connect with it in that way. Solid 3 stars, 6 out of 10. Oh, I love the cover as well. I think this design is gorgeous. The next book I read was The House with the Golden Door by Elodie Harper. This is the second book in the Wolf Den trilogy, the Wolf Den being the first book. I read it last year. This is set in ancient Pompeii, a few years before the whole Vesuvius debacle. And the first one is set in the Wolf Den, which is essentially a brothel, for lack of a better word. Our lead character Mara wants to get out, be a freed woman, but it's a long journey and it's very tumultuous and complicated and layered and nuanced, and I've really enjoyed it. I give it a 9 out of 10, and I was a little bit apprehensive about reading the second one because it feels very different. Our lead character is in a very different place than she was in the first one. The end of the first one it's tumultuous, and I get the feeling, given the end of this one, Elodie's good at this. She's good at these endings that just leave you like, what? What the hell is going to happen in the next one then? I have a feeling the third one's going to be the exact same. It's going to have a very different vibe. And initially upon reading it, I was like, it feels different, I don't know. But I think it's equally as good as the first one. The stories are very different feelings to them, and very different struggles. But they're different but good. Good different. I enjoyed it just as much. I thought it was just as complicated. I had such similar reactions to this one as I did the first one. The relationships and the characters continue to be just as nuanced and complex and layered as they were in the first one. And I just had such a great time reading it. I love this trilogy. I love where it's going. It has the potential to be one of my all-time favourite trilogies. Much like finishing the first one, I cannot wait for the third one. Yeah, it left me speechless. I really enjoyed this. I'd give this one also a 9 out of 10, just like I give the first one. I'm so sad as well that we only get one more book, and I'm so excited to see what she does in the future. Kind of left me in a bit of a slump after this. I think I took a week off reading anything because I didn't know what to read, because all I could think about was this. I don't love the cover of this one as much as I loved the Wolf Den, but I do really love these covers as well, and the spines are really nice. But when I did start reading another book, I started listening to Something Wilder. I also finished Something Wilder. I don't know why I said it like that. The new Christina Lauren. They're just such great escapism. They're so light-hearted and easy to read. I really enjoyed it. It had a really fun, light-hearted vibe. It's a scavenger hunt novel in the desert somewhere. It's a second chance romance. It was a lot of fun. It kind of had a very similar vibe as The Lost City, that Sandra Bullock film with Channing Tatum, if you've watched that. Similar-ish vibes. That one is more comedic, I'd say, the film, and this one is more romance heavy. It's up there, I think it's top 3 Christina Lauren. I knew that even while reading it. It's narrated by Patty Murin and John Root. Patty Murin also narrated In a Holidays and The Soulmate Equation, and she's great. I really love her voice. Her voice very much suits their books. But yeah, if it sounds fun, I'd recommend picking it up. It's a very cute, fluffy read. I don't have a rating written down. I think I'd give it an 8 out of 10. 7, 8 out of 10, somewhere around there. And then the next book I read was also Christina Lauren, and that's Love and Other Words. This one, along with Twice in a Blue Moon, are less rom-coms and more just like romances. And I enjoyed Twice in a Blue Moon, but it's, I think, quite low on my list of Christina Lauren. Cannot say the same for this one. I wasn't expecting to be as attached to it as I was. I don't know if it was the timing. I was kind of going through something while reading it. I mean, my Goodreads review sums it all up. Tell me why this soppy second chance romance is in my top 3 Christina Lauren. So I guess this is also top 3 Christina Lauren for me. I just really enjoyed it. I had a blast. So that's that, I guess. Who knew? Who knew? I have 2 left to read for them, and so I'm excited to read them at some point and see how they go on my list. If I had to rank the Christina Lauren books I read so far, The Unhoneymooners remains my favourite. Then it would be Something Wilder. Then it would be Love and Other Words. In a Holidays. Should I have to hold them all up for you? I'm gonna make a mess. Then it would be In a Holidays, which is the first book of them I read. I just got a little bit frustrated by a couple elements that happened in the end. It's annoying because if that didn't happen, I think it'd be like up here, top 3. Then The Soulmate Equation, which I enjoyed, just not as much as these 4. Imagine Something Wilder is in there. And then I think it's actually exactly how I'm holding this. It would be Twice in a Blue Moon, then Josh and Hazel, then Roomies. Roomies was the most frustrating of all of them, I found. Josh and Hazel I enjoyed, but found it a little bit stereotypical. This one I enjoyed, it just didn't really stand out to me. Oh my god. So this is the order. Imagine Something Wilder is in between The Unhoneymooners and Love and Other Words. Next. How many is left? It feels like we've been doing this forever. The next book I finished was I, Killed Zoe Spanos by Kit Frick. I listened to the audiobook for this one as well. It is full cast, or there is a narrator that we hear from most, because it's only full cast when we get to podcast snippets, which are very like tiny little snippets in this book. I wanted that like Courtney Summer YA thriller mystery like feeling, and it delivered so hard. I listened to it in 2 days. I couldn't put it down. I couldn't figure out what was going on for so long, and I had to figure it out. I did eventually figure a lot of it out. I understood bits of it, but I didn't have the full picture. Like, I didn't understand bits of it. But then those bits that I didn't guess and didn't hypothesize, I wasn't obsessed with the way it turned out. Yeah, there were just 1 or 2 pieces that didn't sit very well. It was still very clever, nonetheless. Jumping ahead though, we follow Anna Ciccone, and she has a summer nanny gig in Heron Mills, which is quite like a nice neighborhood. Literally, we open with the book with Anna admitting that she killed Zoe Spanos. We flash back like months beforehand when she's just moving to this little village and she has no idea who Zoe Spanos is. And Zoe Spanos died like a year before any of this happened. So trying to figure out how she admits to her death when she literally didn't even know who she was, I couldn't figure it out until I did. And I was so proud and happy when I did. If you were to take the grittiness and like the dark tone of Sadie and mix it with like We Were Liars and the symbolism of the privilege there and like the summary vibes, smash them together and I think you get I Killed Zoe Spanos. I really enjoyed this. Love the cover as well. Like, I'd had my eye on this one for a while. It satisfied my need for a YA thriller mystery, so if you're looking for one, I recommend this one. I'd give it an 8 out of 10. I can't go anything lower, even though like I don't know if it's like the cleverest or because there are a couple of things that didn't sit. I think normally I'd give it like a 7, but because of my experience reading it and how much fun and how I couldn't put it down, I had to give it an 8. Next up is Circe by Madeline Miller. I've been wanting to read this as soon as I finished Song of Achilles because I had such a profound response to the Song of Achilles. I loved that book so much. It remains to be one of my absolute most favourites. It's such a gorgeous book in my opinion. And I'd heard nothing but hype for this one. I had read somewhere online that like there are some people that really love the Song of Achilles and just enjoyed Circe, and there's some people that really loved Circe and just enjoyed the Song of Achilles. I put this off for so long because it had so much hype and because I really wanted to love it and I was scared I wasn't, and I felt so much pressure. I didn't love it as much as I love the Song of Achilles. Like, I enjoyed it, but I struggled with this one much more. The writing in the beginning, it didn't feel clunky, but just like the way the sentences were structured, something was off with it. I was really struggling. About halfway through, I switched to audiobook, and I found the writing a lot easier to digest after I did that. Hearing it read aloud, it became very lyrical and very beautiful, and I actually ended up loving the writing. I do feel like some books are meant to be read aloud, like Call Me By Your Name is another one. I read half of it and I was struggling with it a little bit, and then I switched to audiobook, and all of a sudden it became this beautiful lyrical masterpiece. It was narrated by Periton Weeks, I have written in my notes. I think the pressure to love it also got to me. If you don't know what it's about Circe, who is a character from ancient Greek myth. She's the daughter of one of the Titans, Helios, I believe, and her mother was a sea nymph. Her sister is Phaedra's mother, linking back to Ariadne. Ariadne's mother as well. Her name escapes me right now. I feel like it begins with a P. I don't want to say too much of her story because it takes a little while for it to kick in. It's very character driven for the most part. It's hard because her story does weave in with a few different Greek myth stories. I get a sense that Madeline was really sticking true to that. I haven't read them all, so I don't know. There are one or two that I think she might have gone off on a limb just to kind of try and involve her in more pieces of stories, because I think that's the vibe of this book, is that she's connected to quite a few characters and situations. It was paced because of that, because it felt constrained a little strangely for me, and I could never really tell where it was going. There are some really beautiful passages in here. I did in the end really emote with Circe and found it very touching. Maybe if I reread it, I'll have a different experience and I'll enjoy it a little bit more. I definitely left it with warm feelings. I definitely think it's a very beautiful story. I can understand why people would love it so much. I just couldn't get past the structure. 7 out of 10. It's a gorgeous edition. I had to get the hardcover because of how pretty it is. A little map on the inside, and the naked hardcover is just stunning. I did get sun cream all over it though, so that's annoying. Second last book here. We're getting there. I'm very hot right now. My Best Friend's Exorcism by Grady Henricks. Where does it say his name on here? Oh, here. I love the look of this book. I had to get it in this edition because it looks like an old horror VHS, and like all the little details. It's such a cool edition. I've been hearing a lot of hype about Grady Hendrix. I will definitely check out a few more of his books. A lot of them have really interesting premises from the sounds of it, and there's a few I have my eye on. This is actually free on Audible if you have a membership, which is why I read it. I think after Circe, I was still kind of hung up on The House with the Golden Door. I was like going in this weird phase where I just wasn't sure what to read, and so I just needed something different and out of the box for me, and this is a horror novel. This is like one of the first horror novels I've ever read, if not the first. I'm struggling to think of what else I've read that's horror. Not because I have anything against horror, I haven't read much of it up until this point. It started strong. I was really interested in the beginning, and as it went on, like, it's called My Best Friend's Exorcism, which is very suggesting into, you know, what happens in this book. It's about two best friends, Abby and Gretchen starts acting off. Like, there's this weird night where they do acid and Gretchen runs away randomly, find her, and since then she's off. I think you can guess what it is, but it takes so long in the book. Like, I'm talking like the last quarter maybe for our main character to figure out what's going on. Definitely, like, she knows something's up. All these weird things keep happening. It takes so long for her to figure out and to like start actually doing something about it, that I found it very frustrating. When like it's so leading, like we all know what's going on here. I've not watched The Exorcist, so it might have been a play on that genre and that story, rather than it's supposed to be adding something very new. It might just be like playing around with like, you know, the idea of the story, kind of reliving time and place, because it takes place in the 80s, which is why it looks like this. I didn't explain that very well. But I found that frustrating. Like, it didn't add anything new to the genre. It was a very stereotypical story. What's more, in the beginning there were like these really interesting plot points, and they never came to have any meaning. Like, it would have been really interesting if we explored that plot point and it went down that, but it was just dropped. Like, nothing ever came of it. And like, there were a couple other points that could have been really scary and really cool, and it just never came up again. We just kept going down this very slow path of figuring out what's wrong with Gretchen, and it's a very stereotypical ending. I know that lines in here are word for word replicas of the lines from The Exorcist, so again, maybe if I'd watched that film, if I was a big fan of that film, I would feel differently about it. Bummer. I mean, it did the trick though. It got me out of my funk, and overall it was worth the read. It was something different. and it's going to be an Amazon Prime show now. Didn't love the trailer for it though. It looked a little too cheesy. Yeah, like 5 out of 10 for this one. I think it was I'm very neutral with my opinion on it. Lastly, the last book I read this summer, and that is Dune Messiah by Frank Herbert, the second book in the Dune series. I read the first book, I want to say in 2020? Maybe 2021? No, it was 2021. 2021 feels like years ago. I don't know why I keep getting confused with 2020 and 2021. I really enjoyed Dune. I gave it a 9 out of 10. I thought it was so clever, and I had such a great time reading it. This one definitely has a different vibe. I've heard some people say it feels like half a book. It does have that feeling to it. I've heard some people say that it feels like a stepping point between Dune and I think it's Children of Dune. I've heard some people say it feels like the last third of Dune, and I agree. It does kind of feel like the last third of Dune. Dune is left at a strange point. Like, it feels like we've been on this trajectory and then it just ends. This is the come down. This is the fallout of Dune. So because of that, it's very somber feeling. Everything feels very intense. A lot of talking, which Dune had anyway, but Dune also had some action. Not so much. I feel like even Dune had more politics going on in it though. Looking at the fallout of Dune, but in a very kind of condensed, concentrated fashion. I didn't write out my notes, so let's go to my Goodreads review because I think my Goodreads review sums my opinions pretty well. I don't hold this one in as high esteem as I hold the first one, but also some of the things I think that I'd want different to make it more comparable to Dune. I understand why it's not like that. I understand why it's in this concentrated, weird fashion. I do have a couple qualms with this one. Like, I struggle to fault Dune, and I do have a couple things that I can fault in this one. Namely, not understanding points that I literally know have been explicitly explained, albeit in some metaphorical, jargon-heavy way. This may be more a reflection of me than the book though, but I found the first one relatively easy to interpret and theorize all over the place, and I just struggled to do that with this one. Like, the characters do explain things a lot to me, but it just wasn't going in. I didn't know what to make of it. Like, I didn't understand reasoning, even though I know they've explained the reasoning behind things. I kept being like, but why don't you just do this? I don't understand. And because it was with such big, heavy plot points, I struggle with it. I think as time goes on, my camera cut me off there. As I was saying, I think as time goes on, it could be something that I figure out. It's just a matter of me not understanding. So if it comes to the day where I understand what's going on, obviously this problem would be obsolete. But the fact that I struggle with it so much, even though I knew it'd been explicitly explained, albeit in a weird, jargon-heavy, very metaphorical, convoluted way of explaining something. Like, it wasn't clearly explained, it was just in their weird way of explaining things explained. But like, I had none of that with the first book, so it threw me off a little. Also, all the characters that weren't Paul, save for maybe Alia, all other characters were neglected for the sake of following Paul. Someone else said this criticism, I feel like it might have been Daniel Green. Unless they're moving the plot forward in some way, unless it's explicitly necessary for us to be following them, they were just neglected, which kind of makes sense, but the problem was it left me being like, where are they? What is going on right now? Big jumps of time would pass before we'd see people, and these are characters that were so important in the first one and I've grown so attached to, that when like big consequential things happen to them, did I care as much? Probably not, because where had they been? It needs to have this dense, heavy feeling, like we don't have time for shenanigans. I think that would take away from what this book is trying to do. It would have just been nice to get snippets of them. Little snippets, just so we know what's going on, just so it could feel more fleshed out. On the whole though, I did enjoy it and think it's very clever, and it also brought some very strong emotions into me. In the end, I did get quite emotional, I cannot lie. While it doesn't feel like a whole book in some ways, and it's very dreary, I have a lot of respect for this one. I felt so strongly about it that I started annotating it and underlining it and writing in post-it notes. So I clearly thought it was very cleverly done. There are a lot of symbols and metaphors, just like there were in Dune. I would probably give it an 8 out of 10, maybe a 9. I did really enjoy it. 8.5? I don't know. I'm really enjoying this series. I'm very much looking forward to book 3. I think I'm gonna wait until the special editions come out, like this matching special editions, the special edition of the first one. And when this came, I was so frustrated because it's a mass market paperback, but then because I knew I was gonna rebuy it anyway to get the special edition, I was like, just screw it. I'll just beat it up and annotate it and have a grand old time. So now I'm quite fond of this little mass market paperback. Those are all the books I read this summer. This was video was a lot longer than I initially thought it would be. I would love to hear about the books that you read this summer. Please let me know down in the comments. I would love to chat about it. Other than that, that is all I have for this video. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you have an amazing morning, afternoon, evening / night. My name's Jade. I hope I see you again next time. Goodbye!